Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this presentation of improving customer experience with CloudFront. So my name is Steven Saylor, and I am a senior engineer at CleanSlate. So CleanSlate's a consulting company headquartered in Carmel, been voted one of the best places to work. We have several different cloud practices, several different consulting practices like cloud, enterprise integration, and Salesforce. We're partners with some of the major vendors out there, two of which you might have heard of, Azure and AWS. I'm primarily focused in the AWS space. It's kind of my bread and butter, and it's one of my passions. So it's kind of about us. If you want to talk to us, you can find us in the sponsor channel. All right. So like I said, we are CleanSlate Technology Group. But, you know, for a while I've been thinking about it, and I thought about, I love to travel. I mean, who doesn't love to travel? I mean, right now understanding it a little difficult, but I think we should change from the technology group to the travel group. Now, I know it's kind of a change in business and, you know, convincing management that might be a little difficult. So I came up with a static site that we could put up. Just, you know, let's test the waters. Let's get a marketing site out there, put together a promotional video. And now I have to work up the courage to tell my boss, you know what? I'm just going to do it. Worst he can tell me is no. All right. Here we go. And we're about to drop the bomb. We could be the CleanSlate Travel Group. Okay. Understand the skepticism here. We've got the site on my local machine. All right. All right. He's willing to humor us. So, okay, I'll humor you. Show me your plan of how we would even host this if we did. All right. Let's go back. Let's make a diagram. Let's show him how we can do this. I'm going to take 3 minutes and I'll be right back. Here we go. All right. I think we can do this. So we have a load balancer that's pointing to some EC2 instances under an auto scaling group in a VPC. We've got them in our private subnets here for our instances, using certificate manager for SSL. We've got a Route 53 for a domain. I think it's awesome. He's going to love it. So we're going to email it to him. Okay, he's looking at it. So a couple pro designs for this is it's highly available, self-healing, and it's got a small attack surface. And it also lets us use SSL for our web traffic. All right, what's he saying? Sure, those points are all true. However, I can foresee this design becoming costly. Okay. It will require patching, that's true. And it could have poor performance for users that are not close to where it's hosting. All right, fair. In truth, this is more effort than I want to put in for this. I'm sorry, but I can't approve this. Ooh. You know what? We can fix this. Those are fair points, but we can fix it. Let's take another swing. Let's see if we can fix this. All right, give me 3 minutes. I'll go fix this and I'll be right back. So one thing I want to talk about is just what we kind of recap of what we had. We had DNS with our Route 53. We had a private network with our VPC. We had SSL certs with our certificate manager, load balancing with our application load balancer, web servers with EC2, and auto scaling. So there are some pros to this. I mean, it is highly available. It's self-healing. It's got a small attack surface because the web servers are in private subnets. So the only thing really exposed is the ALB to the public. And we can use SSL for traffic. But to Chris's points, it could become costly. I mean, the instances could grow in size and there could be various cost factors. It would require patching because we're using EC2 instances and Amazon doesn't manage that piece for us. We need to manage that. It would have poor performance at distance because if somebody's coming in from across the country or even across the world, it may not resolve as well as somebody who's much closer. It probably is, to be fair, a little over-engineered for this situation. So, I mean, understandably, we were rejected. But I'm going to go fix this, and I'll be back in like 3 minutes. We're going to wow him. Here we go. We just took out a ton of complexity. we simplified this down to an S3 bucket as a static web page, and with our Route 53. He's gonna love this. It's much simpler. So we'll email it to him. Okay, he's looking at it. So the new version, we fixed a couple of things he talked about. It's gonna definitely be cheaper. It won't require any patching, and it's still highly available because S3 uses multiple availability zones to store their data per region. All right, so what do you say? Okay, I feel like this is a step in the right direction. We're getting there. Oh, but it's not a fully baked solution. Ooh. Well, you did simplify it. You also missed some things. This new design won't support SSL for web traffic. That's fair. We did drop that. It would still have performance issues for users that are accessing the site from across the country or the world. Okay, fair. And it would require that our S3 bucket would be public. We don't really want to do that. So it would finally, this would give a user a poor experience. I'm sorry, but I can't approve this. Okay, we can fix this. I have an idea. So that's fair, but we can fix it. Let's give it one more shot. See if we can do this. Okay, last time though. If you don't get it, then we need to move on. No pressure. Okay, no problem. Give me 2 minutes. I'm gonna update this. So what we saw in the last diagram was we have DNS using Route 53, but we moved our file storage and our web hosting to S3. So the pros for this was it is cheap, and it wouldn't require any patching because there are no instances, and it would still be highly available. But to his point, it doesn't support SSL because S3 doesn't natively support SSL. It would have poor performance at distance. It would require the assets in the bucket to be public, and it would kind of give a poor user experience between the possible performance degradation from distance and no SSL. So as much as I don't like it, I get it. We were rejected, but let's fix this. I got it. Last one, best one. Here we go. I think we have a solid winner now. We're gonna wow them. So in here, we are still using an S3 bucket. We're still using Route 53, but we brought back Certificate Manager so that we can have SSL certificates. And in order to use them, we're gonna use CloudFront. So I think CloudFront might be our ace in the hole. Let's see what he has to say. So let's email it. He got it, and it's looking a lot better. Okay. So with this new version, we decided to go with CloudFront. It should clear up a lot of the issues. He's not familiar. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about CloudFront. What is CloudFront? CloudFront is a content delivery network. It's Amazon's flavor. It's not the only one out there, but it is Amazon's flavor. It's comprised of things called edge locations. So these are servers that are used to cache content closer to a user. These are different than regions or availability zones, and there are actually quite a bit more edge locations than there are regions or availability zones. Now, two of the things that you can have out there, or two of the groups of caches that you can have, are a web distribution or a RTMP distribution. So a web, it's used for serving static and dynamic content. Think like files. In our case, it'll be our website files. Or you could cover and do streaming of files using Adobe Flash media servers, the RTMP protocol. That's outside of scope for what we're going to talk about today. A web distribution will do just fine for what we need. So there's over 200 edge locations worldwide. Contrast that to I think it's 18 regions now. Either way, they're spread out all across the globe and in places that there are not regions. It allows for SSL certificates to be used with content. So this is the way that we're actually going to use SSL in tandem with our S3 content. It can be used with a variety of origins. So think, where is our content coming from? In this case, it's S3, or you could use EC2, ECS, so Docker containers, or even non-AWS resources. Finally, it's cheap. So let's talk a little bit about pricing here. The S3 pricing, in the case for this site, we're looking at about 2 cents, let's round up to 3 cents for the standard storage per gig. And then the data transferred out to CloudFront is free because it's going to another Amazon service. Now, CloudFront pricing, transfer out to the open internet is about 8.5 cents per gig for the US and Canada. You could go out to different regions, but this is just kind of where our target market would be for this site. So that's the pricing that I grabbed. And then we would be priced per our requests. So HTTP and HTTPS requests, we're looking at a penny at most for 10,000 requests. So that's pretty cheap there. And then finally, invalidations. And we'll talk a little bit more about invalidations as we go. But those are going to cost us 0.5 cents per path per month. But we get the first 1,000 for free. So let's see what he has to say. So as you can see with the new design, it's far superior, it's cheap, it doesn't require any patching, it's highly available, secure, it allows for SSL, it even helps to provide some DDoS protection due to how S3 and CloudFront all work, and it will work even well for users that aren't close to where this is hosted. All right, wow, okay, I'm impressed. You know what, why not? Let's give it a try. Yes, all right, and a shot. Let's see how the market responds. Let's deploy the site. Awesome, we just got approval. So let's make this thing real. So in this new and approved version, we have DNS using Route 53. We have our SSL search with Certificate Manager. We're still using S3 for our file storage, but now we're going to use CloudFront for caching our content and web hosting. So this is really good because it's cheap. It doesn't require patching, highly available, secure. So we don't actually have to make the assets in the S3 bucket public. We get to use SSL. There is DDoS protection, and there is fast performance at distance. So we are approved. So how do we make this? I mean, let's go through some of the steps that it would take to make this. Let's look at our handy dandy make it real checklist. So for this, we're going to need to register a domain with Route 53, create an SSL certificate with Certificate Manager, create a private S3 bucket, copy our website files to that bucket, okay? Create a CloudFront distribution, update our S3 bucket policies so that only CloudFront can access it, add Route 53 records to point to the CloudFront with Route 53, and let's test it. So let's go through and let's see what this looks like. I'm going to come over here to the AWS console, and we're going to first look at Route 53. Now, in my case, things that typically pertaining to DNS take a while to propagate and to do. So I've already gone ahead and purchased my domain. I have the domain cleanslatetg.cloud. So I have my zone here, but if you were looking to purchase a domain, you could do that right here with the register a domain, type it in, check it, purchase it through here, and then you'll get a hosted zone similar to how I have it. All right, next let's look at Certificate Manager because we need to have SSL certs in order to serve our traffic securely. And as you can see, I've already created these. Now I have one certificate and it has two different names associated to it. It has the zone apex or the base domain, which is our cleanslatetg.cloud. And I also added a star cert for things like www or even a dev.cleanslatetg.com. This gives us some options going forward in the future. So we have registered our domain. We have created our SSL certificate. And now we need to create our private S3 bucket and copy our files to that origin bucket. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to come back here into the console and we're going to look here at S3. Now in my case, I have already hosted these assets, but we'll take a look at what's there. If we look here, we have a CSTG static site bucket. It's hosted in East, and in it we have our resources for our website. It is a private bucket, and it is going to be used to be the origin for CloudFront. So we have created the private bucket in Virginia, and we have the assets or the files in it. So we've created our bucket. copied our website files. Now we need to create our CloudFront distribution. All right. So one thing to know about CloudFront, we're going to go take a look. I have mine created. CloudFront can take 20 to 30 minutes to propagate. So it's one of those that as it's creating, go get a cup of coffee, take a break because it'll take a little while. And so I already have mine hosted. But I want to walk through and just take a quick look. And then I'm going to walk us through what it would look like to actually make one. So in here we can see we have the type, which is our web distribution. It's deployed. It's in the US, Canada, and Europe. It's enabled. We have our alternate domain names, which we'll talk a little bit more in a minute. We have our SSL certificate that is associated to this. We have a root object. Awesome, looks good. And then here in our origins, we have the CloudFront pointing to our bucket. So let's go ahead and let's look at what it would like to make one. And this is actually new. So just so you know, just continuing support for our TMP. All right, let's create a web distribution. And there is a lot here. It is really easy to get overwhelmed, but stick with me. We will get through this. Origin domain name. This is going to be the name of our bucket or EC2 instance or ECS cluster, in our case, S3. And it's nice because since it's an S3 bucket, we get a drop down here of the different buckets we have. So we see here our static site bucket. I can click on there. Fantastic. It's loaded that. The origin path, this would be that if we had folders that were nested in that bucket that we would need to go to. In my case, it's right there at the root. So I don't actually have an origin path that I need CloudFront to look in explicitly. Restrict bucket access. Absolutely. I do not want to make this public if I can help it. So let's restrict that access. And now we're going to move into something called an origin access identity. So what is an origin access identity? Well, it's an identity that CloudFront is going to use in order to authorize itself to the S3 bucket. So don't make the S3 bucket public, but still give CloudFront the permissions it needs to reach inside. So let's say create a new identity, and this comment here is how it's going to be created. So we could just call it CSTG travel. Oh yeah. And then here, and I'm going to call your attention to this because if you do not do this, it will bite you. Ask me how I know. We are going to say, yes, update bucket policy. This is going to actually go into our S3 bucket and update the access policy for us to make sure that CloudFront and S3 can talk to one another. If you don't do this, CloudFront doesn't have the right permissions to talk to S3 and it will not work. And we're going to take a look here at that bucket. So let's open a new tab real quick. And let's look at our bucket. And let's take a look at our bucket policies. So here we have a bucket policy, which is enabling CloudFront to reach into S3. You can see here the principal of our origin access identity with this ID, and it is allowed to get objects for that bucket. This bucket policy is what allows the bucket to be private, but still lets CloudFront access it. Very, very important. So let's hop back over here. We're going to skip down a little bit. In our case, we'd like to redirect HTTP traffic to HTTPS. We're going to leave the allowed methods. We're not going to change any of these. I'm going to call out here, though, our time to live. So time to live is how long will CloudFront cache our objects. So we have a minimum and a maximum and a default. Once a timeout occurs, once that time to live is expired, CloudFront, if that resource is needed, will reach back into the origin and fetch a new version. Otherwise, it doesn't pull new versions, even if you add or if you update to that bucket. So you may have to wait on timeouts in order to get your files to be updated. Or you can do what's called an invalidation. So an invalidation, and we'll actually go through that back in a minute, but is the forcing of CloudFront to re-update files from S3 in our case. or from their origin. This is important because if I make an update to my site and I want my users to be able to see that update, I don't really want to have to wait for that time to live to expire. So I could invalidate my cache and make CloudFront pull the new files and deploy those to the edge locations so that my site is now up to date. So keep in mind time to live along with invalidations for updating objects in our cache. We're gonna go down here. We're gonna skip these. Okay, down in our distribution settings, we have alternate domain names. So if you saw on the CloudFront that I've already created, we added 2 different alternate domain names in here. This is how CloudFront is going to know to come across our URL. This works in tandem with Route 53. So if we don't have our URLs in here, CloudFront will not service traffic from them. So we would want maybe a www.cleanslatetg.cloud and maybe a cleanslatetg.cloud. Now that won't work unless we also use our custom SSL certificate. That's the one that we created in the certificate manager. And there is a nice little drop down here that gives us access to that certificate. We're going to scroll down. We're going to look. All right. Another thing I want to call out here is this default root object. So you come across as a user to cleanslatetg.cloud. You hit it and it hits CloudFront. Everything works on a DNS standpoint. And now it doesn't do anything. Well, why? Well, because we didn't tell CloudFront what's the base object that you need to go to. In our case, it would be index.html. Serve my index.html page. If we don't do that, CloudFront doesn't know where to go. So, and that is it. That is what we're going to do for this. You can enable logging, and you can add a bucket for logging, comments. You can enable a IPv6. There's even a feature up here that I didn't call out, but you can do caching, compressing objects. That will help with the payload going to your users. Those aren't ones that we've actually done because this site's kind of media heavy. But anyway, so let's take a look back at our CloudFront distribution and let's look at invalidations really quickly. So over here on this tab, invalidations, this is where we can come to invalidate the cache, like what we talked about. So if I wanted to create an invalidation, I could come here and I have to give a path. In my case, I could do a /star, and that would update all of the objects in my cache. Now be aware, when you do path invalidations, remember that they cost. So that can rack up in your cost. So if you can target to a specific set of files, that's even better because you can save a bit of money. All right, let's hop back to our make it real checklist. So we have created our CloudFront distribution. We have updated our policy. And finally, we need to add routes to our Route 53 record so that we can ensure that it points to CloudFront. So we're gonna come, lost my page. There we go. Let's go to Route 53. We wanna make sure that cleanslatetg.cloud and cleanslatetg.cloud and www.cleanslatetg.cloud both will resolve to CloudFront. We're going to do that here in our hosted zone Route 53. You can see here, I have a type record, which is an alias to our CloudFront, and a www record, which is an a type alias to CloudFront. So you might say, I thought A records were IPs, but that's a C name. Well, Amazon allows for alias records within A records of Amazon resources. So effectively, they will resolve the IP address for you and will serve that. And that actually can save you some cost over a CNAME record because you can get some charges from the lookups on CNAME. All right, so we've registered, we're down to here, we've added our routes, so let's test our site. And I welcome you guys to test with us. Here we go. We have our cleanslatetg.cloud up here. Scroll, you can see the Carousel working. Looks good. All right, remember this is hosted out of a CloudFront distribution. Let's see how this video loads. It's running really well. It's very smooth. It's not choppy. It looks really good. Not shabby for a 163 meg file. It's very impressive, the fact that CloudFront is serving such a large file and it's buffering beautifully. Test. So let's talk about the what ifs and what abouts. So what if we need to change an object in S3 and have it immediately take effect? So these were the invalidations we talked about. You can either do your time to live and have windows if you wanted to, a little harder. More often than not, you're going to do invalidations when you do a deployment. So go out, deploy, invalidate the objects that you just updated so that they will now take effect. What if I add new objects to my S3 bucket? How long will I have to wait until they're available for CloudFront? You don't have to wait for new objects. CloudFront and S3 recognize that those are new objects and it will add them to the cache. So what if we hosted the web page through S3 only? I mean, that's still an option. And then also, what if we hosted the S3 bucket what if we hosted the web page in an S3 bucket far away? What would that do to our performance? Those are great questions. Like, let's take a look. This is kind of that scenario 2 that we talked about. What would that look like? Let's come over here to our S3 console. Come back to here. I have actually hosted this site in Sydney, Australia, just through an S3 bucket. So we're going to come in here. Let's take a look at our properties and let's grab the URL of this bucket. All right, we can see right up here, right off the bat, that it shows that it's not secure because it's not using SSL. Okay, and we have the S3 URL here. We could have pointed some CNAME records to that, or some A records, I'm sorry, some Route 53 records to that, but it's not secure. It seemed to load fairly well though, but let's really test it. Let's see how this video works. Uh-oh. We are having some buffer problems. I mean, to be fair, this is a large file and it's being served from Sydney, Australia. And we're not past the first second. We saw in the other distribution that it streamed beautifully, but this is what we were talking about with those performance degradations. This is an absolute fact that can happen. Yeah, we're not even getting past second 2. So that's what it would look like if we hosted in another region. We don't get the SSL benefits, which is important. In our case, it's just a static marketing site and we're not really retrieving any user data, but we absolutely could add that in the future. And it's just very important to have. And then we can see what it does to performance. So let's talk about those performance metrics. So we can see here that with that bucket in Sydney, Australia, the average time in milliseconds is 709 milliseconds. Let's contrast that to CloudFront. 71 milliseconds on average. So 709 milliseconds down to 71 milliseconds. We're looking at a 1,000% improvement. That is insane. And not even for a whole lot more. So let's talk some of the future improvements for this. What could we do in the future to make this better? Well, we could add the ability for users to create accounts and log in. You could use Amazon Cognito for that. We could add dynamic data to our static page. You could use an API gateway with that. We could add a submission form that would allow users to receive confirmation emails with Lambda and SES, and so much more. So let's talk about the gotchas and the gremlins. So invalidations. Invalidations do cost per path that is being invalidated. And target objects that you need to invalidate, and only those objects. Or you could change the time to live to be more appropriate. Excuse me. Custom SSL certs and alternate domain names. So this is what we were talking about with those alternate domain names. that you have to have an SSL cert that goes along with them, or that's not going to work. So you can only add those if they're covered with that SSL cert. So make sure that when you create your SSL cert, go ahead and add that wildcard cert along with the base domain. It'll give you options for the future. The default root object. So this is where we talked about, you hit CloudFront, but if you don't provide this, CloudFront doesn't know where to direct your users. So make sure that you populate that default root object, or you will have errors with CloudFront. And then finally, Route 53 entries. So for proper DNS routing, you need to specify an alternate domain name in CloudFront, but also those Route 53 records. If you don't do that, it won't resolve properly. And so for cost optimizations, use A records instead of CNAME records to reduce the lookup cost on CNAMEs. So there are so many more advanced topics that we could talk about with this. I mean, there's pre-signed cookies, there's pre-signed URLs, there's CloudFront with Docker, serverless video on demand, time to live, and just so many more. I'm not even going to talk about it. There's a lot you can do with this. So that being said, I wanted to thank everyone. You might be asking, how do I get started? Well, first, go download the presentation materials. I'm providing cloud formation scripts of how to create the CloudFront and the S3 buckets, etc. And then I will make my slides available as well. Next, get some hands-on experience with some proven resources. So I added a link here for some of the resources that I use to learn. And finally, connect with me, get involved in the community. Reach out. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. You can hit me up in my LinkedIn, or you can reach out with my email. Also, I will be in the sponsor Clean Slate channel, so be happy to talk to you there. And finally, as a thank you from Clean Slate, we would like to make you aware of some special offers for all attendees that we have that we found provide a great value. So first is an offering that's focused on cloud optimization, cloud cost optimization, because I mean, everybody wants to save money. And the second is our planning workshop, which is designed to help you build a strategy to get the most out of your cloud investment. So if you're interested, please head over to the Clean Slate Slack channel and someone will connect with you there. Appreciate you guys' time, and I'm hoping to see you in my next presentation. I believe that's at 1:30 about integrations into Alexa. So I'll actually kind of continue this, and we're going to see where we can take this using Alexa. So thank you all for your time.